The European Union has a long list of candidate countries wishing to join. Turkey became a candidate in 1999, North Macedonia in 2005, Montenegro in 2010, Serbia in 2012, Albania in 2014, and Moldova, Ukraine, and Bosnia and Herzegovina in 2022. But even though some countries have been waiting for over 10 years, we firmly believe that the EU should not accept any new members. Yet. So why shouldn't the EU expand its borders? Let's preface this by saying that we have absolutely no problem bringing more members into the EU. In fact, from a geopolitical perspective, we strongly encourage it. China and Russia have already asserted their presence along the EU border, in particular in the Western Balkan region. So, if the EU doesn't offer a clear path to membership for these countries, foreign influence may only grow stronger, thereby destabilizing our continent. Nonetheless, we feel that there are two key factors that stop a new country from joining the EU. Firstly, the EU is simply not ready for a 28th member. And secondly, the candidate countries are not ready to join the EU either. In this video, we will look at the first factor only, and we will also look into possible solutions. The second factor will be covered in a future video, so subscribe to the channel if you're interested. So why is the EU not ready? Let me tell you a story to explain this. And yes, I'm going to have to pick on Hungary once again. Since the early 2010s, there have been concerns about Hungary's actions and policies that some believe undermine key EU principles, such as media freedom, judicial independence, treatment of minorities, and corruption. As a consequence, in 2022, the European Commission recommended to block 7.5 billion euros of EU funding to Hungary. The Commission drew up a list of reforms that would have to be met before the money would be released. Obviously, Hungary's leader, Orbán, was not happy and decided to go on an EU blocking spree, hindering EU progress wherever he could. For instance, an 18 billion euro support package to Ukraine. 26 countries said yes, Hungary said no. A minimum corporation tax of 15% for corporations across the EU. 26 countries said yes, but Hungary said no. Arms to Ukraine. 26 countries said yes, but Hungary said no. All of these proposals required unanimity, meaning that all 27 countries have to agree. And in this case, Hungary strategically vetoed. One can also call it blackmail, to try and unfreeze EU funds. And it worked. On the 15th of December last year, the EU unblocked some of the funds to Hungary, and in return, Hungary withdrew their veto. I think this example shows why the veto vote is such a problem for Europe, both at home and abroad, as it hinders EU progress, slows the EU's ability to react quickly to global crises, and incentivizes member states to hold the EU at ransom to get special treatment so that they won't veto. Currently, 27 member states have a veto power. However, if the 8 candidate countries were to join the bloc, this would result in 35 members, each with a potential veto vote. Such a scenario could effectively paralyze EU progress, potentially rendering it ineffective and irrelevant. Thus, we believe that EU enlargement needs to go hand in hand with EU reform. But to understand this, let's first explain how things work today. The European Union has 2 legislative institutions, the European Parliament and the Council of the EU. The Council of the EU, consisting of national ministers from all member states, holds equal legislative authority together with the European Parliament. But crucially, the Council possesses veto powers in key policy areas, including foreign policy, fiscal policy, and social security. Not all EU decisions are made unanimously. For less contentious topics, the EU uses qualified majority voting, also called QMV, which requires agreement from 55% of member states, representing 65% of the European population. So the answer is simple, right? The EU could simply remove the unanimity vote and use QMV instead. Both French and German ministers share this perspective and aim to utilize the passerelle clause, enabling operational changes within the Union without treaty amendments. If all countries agree, then the EU can switch from unanimity to qualified majority voting for crucial areas such as taxation and foreign policy. This isn't perfect, however. Smaller member states argue that they feel left out when following this model, as their low populations mean they don't have the voting power to stand up against the larger powers. To fix this issue while avoiding the troublesome veto vote, we could have a system where key legislation requires a supermajority to be approved. basically a step up from qualified majority voting. This means that if 75% of the member states, representing 80% of the EU's population, agree on a proposal, it should pass. If we look at the 7 areas where EU countries currently have a veto vote, we would allow some of these to be decided upon with a supermajority vote. This would speed up the EU's decision-making process, while still allowing for smaller member states to band together and put a stop to any proposal that disproportionately hurts them. Also, we probably shouldn't completely remove the veto vote either. Some topics, such as EU membership, may make sense to require full support of the entire Union. So now we have 2 clear options. First, the French and German proposal to use qualified majority voting for policy areas such as foreign policy and tax. Or second, to create a new category of voting called supermajority voting. The irony is, however, that to implement either option, it requires all 27 countries to agree with each other. And guess what? Poland and Hungary have already stated that they have no interest in removing the veto vote. In fact, according to Euronews, there could be up to 9 countries that will oppose changes to unanimity, meaning that it's unlikely to change anytime soon. We have extensively talked about unanimity being the most important area in need of reform before we take in new members, but there are many other areas that need to be evaluated. For example, the rotating presidency of the Council of the EU. Currently, EU member states hold the EU presidency for 6-month cycles. However, with the potential addition of 8 more countries, the total number of member states would be around 35, resulting in a waiting period of 17 years before a country can assume the presidency again. This extended duration raises concerns about the practicality and effectiveness of the current system, indicating a need for reform to address the considerable waiting time for member states. Next, there's the parliament seat distribution. Currently, the European Parliament seats are allocated to member states based on their population size. The number of seats in the parliament is capped at 751, with each member state receiving a minimum of 6 seats. When more countries join the European Union, it can create challenges with regards to the allocation, as we either add new seats to the parliament or dilute the seats of existing member states. Either way, it will result in a loss of power for existing member states. Next, there are the commissioners. The current model of having 1 commissioner from each member state in the EU Commission, representing 1 policy area, may face challenges with 35 potential members. The increased number of commissioners could make the structure more cluttered and potentially less efficient in decision-making and coordination. Then there might be the biggest one yet, EU budget. New EU member states are likely to become net receivers of the EU budget. This means that existing EU countries might need to contribute more or receive less. For instance, the EU might need to rethink its agricultural policy, where it currently offers its member states a lot of support. Here's what we think though. We should accept no new EU members without significant EU reform. And significant EU reform will be very unlikely, as some member states will most likely block any real change. Therefore, maybe there's only one way forward, a multi-tiered EU, or as some like to call it, a multi-speed EU. This basically means that some countries integrate further, while others don't. This is a topic I'm going to get into a lot more in the future, so subscribe to the channel if you're interested. In the meantime, I've made a video about this in the past. It is a bit old, but still very relevant in case you want to check it out. See you in the comments, and until next time.